Hello again. In this video, I'd like to talk about two of the most important terms that Derrida uses in relation to his understanding of religion. They are messianicity without messianism and the democracy to come. Now, before we get into messianicity without messianism, let's have a little recap on what messianism is and different variants of it in Western thought. So Jewish messianism would look something like this diagram here. As we move forward in time, we look forward to the return of Messiah, God's anointed. And he will bring justice and peace and a restoration of God's people to God's favour. And everything will turn out wonderfully when Messiah comes. Okay? Now, that structure is replicated outside religious discourse in the 20th century. So you've got a Marxian messianism, a messianism in the thought of Karl Marx that obeys a very similar structure but populates it with different content. So now as we look forward, what we long for is not the return of Messiah, but the rising up of the proletariat against the bourgeoisie in a revolution, leading in the first instance to a dictatorship of the proletariat and then to a classless society, which has a lot of the features of the reign that the Messiah brings in that it's justice and peace and harmony. Okay, so it's a similar structure, but it's a different set of terms that populate it. So there are different messianisms. Leads to the question then, what does Derrida mean when he says messianicity without messianism? How do you have messianicity without messianism? Well, it's one instance of a wider trend, a wider trait of his thought, which is to have X without X. He has religion without religion, he has God without God, and of course he has messianicity without messianism. So what work is this without doing? What does he mean when he says without? One way to think of it is as a structural movement without any determinate content. So in other words, messianicity without messianism would be the structure of messianic return without any content to what Messiah is going to return or what exactly it's going to look like when he does. Derrida himself in Marx and Sons says the following: Messianism, which I regard as a universal structure of experience. Okay, so it's not just religious, it's a universal structure of experience, and which cannot be reduced to religious messianism of any stripe. So what has he done here? He's taken a movement looking forward to the coming of something that will bring in a state of peace and justice. And he's abstracted that movement from any determinate content, from any Jewish or Marxian messianism, for example. And he said that those determinate contents are actually reductions of the general principle. And therefore he can say in this second quotation on the screen, what will come is not any named Messiah, but, quote, the most irreducibly heterogeneous otherness. So it's not simply that we don't know what Messiah will come, but whatever comes will confound our expectations of whatever it is. So what is to come is not this Messiah or that Messiah or the other Messiah. That would be messianism, locking it down, giving it a determinate content. What is to come is otherness. What is to come certainly won't be what we're expecting. Whatever it is, it won't be what we're expecting. And therefore he's not tying the content of what is to come down. And the messianicity, therefore, is the structure of there being something to come that will bring peace and justice, however they're understood. But the refusal of messianism is the refusal to give that any determinate content. Now, you'll remember that in the last video I said hold on to the thought of something which in Derrida's life goes by another name. So he said the God goes by another name in my life. What we've got there is what we've got here, which is an evacuation of determinate content. It's not Jewish messianism, it's not Marxian messianism, and are holding on to the structure that underlies that content, and then putting the structure forth as that which is original, and the determinate content is always a reduction of that structure. So here I've written on the screen, this is an important and repeated move in recent European thought. Finding something in, for example, Christianity, deeper than Christianity. The structure of messianicity is in Christianity, but it's deeper than Christianity. Something of which its manifestation in Christianity is just one among many. It can be understood as a formalism. In other words, it's taking the form and leaving the content. So messianism is not structurally Jewish or Christian for Derrida. It's a universal structure of experience that Christianity and Judaism happen to talk about. But they're only one way of talking about it among others, and we shouldn't lock it down to any one of its manifestations. It's an incredibly important move to recognize when someone's doing this, abstracting determinate content and suggesting that the formal gesture is deeper and more original than the content. You find it a lot if you're looking for it in modern and contemporary thought, and people do it a lot with Christianity. So, what would messianicity without messianism look like in terms of our diagrams? Well, we've still got the present, we've still got time stretching into the future, but now what is to come is indeterminate. The only thing we know about it is that we don't know what it will be, and all our expectations will be confounded. This is what Derrida calls a democracy to come. He doesn't necessarily mean every person in the country gets a vote sort of democracy. He's meaning it in a more abstract sense. The reign of peace and justice, of equality and freedom together, that's what he means by the democracy to come. It's not likely to happen at the next election. And indeed, as far as Derrida is concerned, it certainly won't. The democracy to come, the reign of equality and liberty together, is always to come. It's never arrived. And that's a move that we're familiar with from last week, isn't it? I can never sit here now and say, I am just right here in the present. And therefore, I can never say, this is the democracy to come right here in the present. It's always a horizon towards which we're moving and striving, but that's never here. In Derrida's own words, the event must also announce itself. The notion of the event as that which comes, that which arrives, that which happens, without calling in advance, without forewarning, announcing itself without announcing itself, without any horizon of expectation, any telos, formation, form, or teleological pre-formation, whence its always monstrous, unpresentable character. The future is monstrous for Derrida. The democracy to come is monstrous in the sense that it doesn't conform to any of our expectations. It's a monster in that it's not neat and tidy. It's not domesticated. We won't say, yes, that's exactly what I was expecting. It's monstrous in the sense that it breaks our categories apart. And therefore, in one of the interviews in Positions, he can say, that he wants to avoid at all costs, quote, a future that would not be monstrous, would not be a future. It would already be a predictable, calculable, and programmable tomorrow. So if we can predict what is to come, then it's not worth waiting for. And this reminds us, doesn't it, of what he was saying last week about law and justice. Law is calculable, but it's not just. If all we're doing is calculating, if all we're doing is predicting what will come, then we're missing the singularity. We can't be surprised. Things can't be unique. It's a very similar structure here, thinking about the democracy to come. And so Derrida therefore says, democracy remains to come. This is its essence. In other words, if it were right here, right now, it wouldn't be the democracy to come, insofar as it remains. Not only will it remain indefinitely perfectible, hence always insufficient and future, but belonging to the time of the promise, it will always remain in each of its future times to come. Which is a way of underlining the fact that we can never say right here and right now we've achieved it. It's a messianic structure of experience. It's always to come. It never arrives. We live perpetually in this expectation and this waiting of a messianicity without messianism, because we can't predict with certainty what it is that's going to come.